You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
Touchdown! A.J. Brown! An interception by the Eagles! He is hit. They got him again! They got him back at the 26. He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles!
Hello, everybody. Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of. All right, there we go. That's what happens when Brian's not around. Here we go. Takes it. Welcome one, welcome all, everybody, to another episode of Flipping the Birds. Obviously, I'm here, Zach Chavalilla, Eric Reese, and we have a special guest today, PSN's own Mike Greger. Mike, how you doing today, man?
Hey, Zach. Thanks for having me, man. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. And, we're excited to talk a little bit about mandatory minicamp, something new for Sirianni's era Eagles, and excited to really kind of dive into that with you, excited to dive into that with everybody in the comments, and, really just talk some birds, because we got to talk some birds at least once a week. So, really just kind of diving right on into it. There was a lot just from this initial first wave here, right? So I guess I'll kind of let you pick where we start, Mike. What was, you would say, the biggest thing that kind of stood out to you of everything from today's news that came out?
I guess I'll start with the obvious. I mean, Bradbury moving to safety, Sirianni announcing it in the press conference before they even got onto the practice field. I mean, we saw him play some nickel last year, but moving him to safety seems like a big move. I don't know. Well, he didn't actually really play much because then he went into the medical tent and he really didn't play. He didn't. I think he missed the majority of practice. So some people were speculating, some other reporters, that maybe it's all posturing by them and he's probably not going to be on the roster. He's probably going to get cut is kind of the consensus some people still seem to think. So I'll leave that out there in the ether for people to debate whether you think it's all like a thing and he never is going to get on the field and actually play safety. But it's interesting to think about when you look, because I figure the corners are pretty set at this point, and after the way he played last year, I would find it hard to believe that they want to put him back out there when they have young guys that they're banking off for the future that need to get snaps. But to me, that was the biggest thing from today's practice. And then number two, the play of sticking with the cornerback stuff, the play of Kaylee Ringo. Apparently I wasn't actually at practice, but from what I've read and some of the things that I've heard is that he was the star of the show today, broke up a couple passes, a big one over the middle for Paris Campbell that he broke up. And you got to remember, this is a guy that they gave up a third-round pick to go up and get last year. So they do have expectations for him. And if they're rebuilding the secondary, especially with the two guys they've run this year, you got to think he's going to have a chance to compete. And he did play well when he went in last year at the end of the season. So if he's playing well in camp, you got to think he's got a shot to really contribute this year. So those two things are the biggest to me. Yeah,
I would say based on what we've seen from the defensive structuring, I think it is a little telling. I agree that I'm not ready perhaps to proclaim, what some have speculated about the whole James Bradbury situation. It is, with that being said, obviously very suspect, where the guy's talking about a position change for the first time in his career, something that it doesn't really make a lot of sense for, except for the fact that he's a cornerback who slowed up a little bit. Outside of that, I guess you could make an argument for the ball skills and the fact that the Eagles are light at safety. But then the injury comes just a couple minutes into practice, heads into the medical tent, comes out without the helmet, and his day was done with that. So I don't know exactly what it is going on. I would agree that it doesn't really seem like they have plans for Bradbury contributing this season, I would say. So whether that means that they do end up eventually cutting him, or whether they do hold on just to see if there's an injury in their own ranks, if there's an injury somewhere else, and then maybe either have him there as a reserve or you have that trade value. I mean, time will tell. I would think that would make more sense than cutting him at this moment. Because if it's the same financially, you might as well hold on to the guy until you know if you can get something for him
Right.
or not. Eric, do you think that there's any chance that maybe we're kind of misreading this, and there is a possibility of Bradbury contributing at safety? I see you smile already. I had to ask the question, but
Absolutely
go on, give your honest answer.
Absolutely not. Absolutely. I mean, and then you are going to get a unbiased, like unfiltered answer by somebody who loosely is following along. Like, I mean, I have enough commentary on it just to give an opinion, but I mean, what do I know? I'm not in the room. I will say this, absolutely not. I think there's enough effective bodies at safety. If you are going to have them on the team, like you just said, it's going to cost the same to cut them, or probably the value of to trade them. So hold on to them. If someone wants to give you a late round pick, so be it. You get another pick, whatever. If he's not playing corner, you're not going to all of a sudden make him he just backpedaled today and fell over. I mean, backpedaling is a big part of safety. I mean, I don't understand how we can sit here and say all of a sudden and have me buy it, right, as a fan, that he's going to play safety when this man didn't make it, the whole way through the first day mini camps. It does seem like a ruse, and ruse might be because who you fooling, really? It's not really a good ruse. I don't know. It seems like this is like a, what was this? It's not like really a Rondé Barber situation where it's all of a sudden like, oh, he'll be fine here, we'll switch roles. No, this is, we're kind of a guy that we kind of already had on the way out. Hey, maybe this is what, kind of helps Avonte Maddox, have a more of a role in the team.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say is then you had Avonte come out during his press conference and say that he's playing more safety, and they're definitely cross-training him to play safety. So, I mean, if you're going to plug someone in, he's already played it, and they like him here, and he's kind of a fan favorite in a way. So, I mean, he would be the guy, in my opinion, too.
Yeah, we were talking a lot last week about, like, some guys who can switch over from corner to play the safety, or if it would make more sense just to bring a safety in as a free agent. Out of all of those things, have your opinion. The thing that makes the least amount of sense would be putting James Bradbury at safety.
Yeah, I would agree. And again, I think it's more than anything just kind of a placeholder. You have a young guy that you're excited about in Keely Ringo, and he's producing. We've heard the reviews effectively of how he performed at camp. And, you know that he potentially has a role in this team in the future. And then thereafter, there's other guys, young guys that they're excited about as well. Talking about Keon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. So, like, there's obviously a long list of guys who are probable to get that opportunity on the outside ahead of James Bradbury. So, for now, to kind of keep him involved in the situation, not necessarily, or I guess I should say, to not lose as much leverage as you would if he was just sitting outright. Kind of just maintain his position on the team, as it were, and pretend to give him a role just so you can maximize that potential return on investment. If you do end up moving him a little bit closer, to the start of the season there. But Ron does also bring up a good point. Just talking about the values of having the value of having a vet in the room, I should say. It is a young room. Darius Slay. Let's just say it'd be nice to have another veteran voice in the secondary, team, and a guy who can kind of contribute to that. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is kind of a guy I think that you kind of want to follow by example. He's just a guy who puts, he's eccentric, but at the same time, he clearly works hard, and I think that's the lesson you kind of want to take away from there. But a guy like James Bradbury, kind of more so that, more solemn kind of leader. I think kind of guy that, technique-wise, maybe some of these young guys can pick some stuff up. So, I do think that there is some value to that, but again, like if it wasn't for the potential to get something, talking most likely pick-wise, a little bit down the road, I'm just not too sure, what the point would be. But before we get to Keely Ringo, who you did bring up, I just want to bring up Maddox for a second because you did also bring him up. The general consensus about Maddox's safety, again, like Eric said, we did talk about that last week. It wasn't met with the most warmth, the idea. It was kind of something that was like, just extra body, blah blah blah. Not necessarily a plan going forward. Uh, did you hear anything out of camp about his actual performance in safety? Obviously, it's something that he's done before, but is there something tangible that came out that in terms of, well, hey, this might actually happen during the season, other than the fact that they're just taking looks at it, or is it more so just we want more bodies, we want more veterans, we want guys who possibly can pass off some of these traits who have played a little bit of that position before?
Yeah, I didn't hear anything about that. And actually, it sounded like he was switching between safety and nickel corner today anyway. So, again, yeah, I don't know. I just guess it's probably just another avenue for him to make the team at this point, I would think, because with all those young corners, it's kind of getting crowded in that room. And you got to think that they want to go in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, kind of just looking around the room, it's a little bit more cramped of a room as we, I guess, suspected a week ago, just because you do have your, I want to jump off the ledge, like first impressions of, minicamp where, okay, all of a sudden Ringo, Isaiah Rogers, then you have, I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say like everybody was there. So Mike, was like Slay there today?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was there. Okay. I mean, be it being mandatory minicamp, I did still hear that some players weren't there.
The only player out there was Dickerson. Who had
Dickerson? Okay.
Excused absence. They didn't say what it was.
Okay. So
Yeah,
Slay was
all I know
there.
is that it was an excused personal absence was all that it was.
Okay. So you had those three corners there, and then also to include a guy like Cooper, and then you have Mitchell. So, yeah, those guys, like, it's kind of a crowded room now. You're talking about, people who are going to have to kind of show some flexibility to just make the roster. You're starting to think, well, what do you need out there? And like Maddox, I will take Maddox at this point, even though he was just released and then brought back. I mean, Bradbury just kind of going back to that, dude. It reeks of like, this is just a player waiting to be cut, maybe just to be put in IR to do something with, but he won't be on the field for Philadelphia.
Yeah, it sounds like they're waiting for, someone to tear an ACL on another team late in camp, and then they can make a trade or something.
Right.
And we've seen Howard do that kind of stuff before. I mean, obviously the Sam Bradford trade comes to mind, but there's been plenty of examples of, kind of taking advantage of the misfortune of other teams, and that's what the good front offices in this business do. So it's not surprising to kind of see that there. But now kind of pulling from the older generation of the cornerback room to that younger generation, Keely Ringo, I think, has absolutely exceeded expectations when the Eagles drafted him. Not only just his performance last year, but it seems like he's keeping up that play level so far during OTAs and minicamp, and to the point where it seems that he may be rewarded with a starting spot here on the outside. So what have you particularly heard of Ringo this year, or what have you seen from him, last year, or even from the OTAs, that kind of gives you faith that he could possibly be that guy on the outside opposite Darius Slay until maybe a guy like Keon Mitchell is able to step in there and starting role?
I mean, for me, I think if he keeps playing like this, even though it's just OTAs and there's no contact or anything, but if he keeps playing like this, I mean, he's got to play himself into a starting spot. I mean, I thought he was kind of, when he came, like last training camp and preseason, I thought he was a little rusty. He got bit on double moves a lot, but they casually brought him along. And then when he actually got in there to some meaningful snaps at the end of the year, he was playing really well. So he's going to make it tough. And it sounds like they keep saying Dejean's gonna Dejean. I'm sorry, I'm gonna mess that up all year. It sounds like they keep saying that, but I mean, they need a reliable nickel guy. I just don't see him not playing the nickel corner spot this year. And then and then it'll be Slay, obviously, and then it'll be Ringo versus Mitchell. And I mean, Ringo's got the experience, and it seems like he really wants the job right now, the way he's playing. So I could definitely see a scenario where he's the starting corner in week 1.
Could you see a scenario where Isaiah Rodgers is over either one of them for week 1?
I was away last week, so I was trying to catch up, but it sounded like he was wowing everyone last week. I'd like to actually see him in action to get a better opinion on that. But I know there was some hype around him. I mean, he's got the speed, and he's tall and physical. Was he 170 pounds? I mean, I think it's going to be a good competition all summer. That's kind of a cop-out answer, but I really do. I think it's a young room, and they're going to be fighting for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of the right answer too, because you look at Ringo, and we already said it earlier. He was a 3rd-round pick, and in about 1 calendar year, he's turned around and it looks like seemingly might have developed, more than a guy like how long has Zach McPherson or Josh Jobe been with the Eagles, and we're sitting there going like, man, maybe they'll come around. They never came around. So like he's just hurdled all of them to maybe be getting some like competitive snaps, it seems like.
And then it sounded like what I read today about some of the practice notes I was reading, it sounded like they're really making an effort to see what all these guys can do on special teams. Like they were running like Mitchell down on gunner drills. So I think that's really something to keep an eye on too. They really want these guys to be well polished and hybrid and can do everything.
Yeah, I think that there's just kind of a general importance placed on improving special teams based on where it's been. Obviously, we saw kind of a renaissance of sorts, when you're talking about specifically the returner spot, but I think there's still opportunities, specifically when you're talking about guys who are playing gunner, where you can see perhaps a good bit more production there. Kind of moving the conversation still on the defensive side, but a little bit toward the linebackers. So the word that came out a few weeks ago and all that, there's been a lot of positive talk about Zach Bond, right? And specifically how he's been working with the team and Fangio's system, this and that. He continued to start in the 7-on-7 drills alongside Devin White, who I think Devin White's the assumed starter there, just because you think he's one of the relatively marquee free agent signings that they brought in. I understand that the value is not as high as it initially sounded because there's a lot of unguaranteed money there. But the idea of Zach Bond starting, at least for now, alongside Devin White, is that something where should be excitement around Zach Bond, or is that something where there should be concern around Nakobe Dean? Just in your opinion, just for either of you guys, speculative opinion at this point. How do you personally feel on that?
Mike, I'll let you go first because I think I've been riding Nakobe Dean pretty hard recently. So.
Yeah, I'm not high on Nakobe Dean myself either. Just I didn't think he looked great in the preseason before he got the injury, and now he seems like he gets hurt all the time. I know everyone loves his football intelligence, and he's a smart kid and knows the defense and all that. But I mean, I just haven't seen where I think he's going to be the foundational linebacker. Now, obviously, he's a high pick. He hasn't gotten enough playing time to make that kind of assessment. So I still think if he can stay healthy, it's probably going to be his job to lose, even if he doesn't start week 1. But my confidence level isn't high in him. But the way Bond was talking about young Trotter today was pretty. That raised a couple eyebrows for me because he was saying how intelligent and smart he is, and he's memorized the playbook already. And I don't know. I mean, if you really had I know there's a couple positions to watch on this team when training camp starts for real, but the linebacker is really going to be interesting. I think Bond will probably start week 1 just because it seems like Fangio just loves the guy, and he's kind of a veteran and has some experience there. But I'd be really surprised if he's the starter at the end of the season.
So there's a possibility that Trotter could easily work his way in to have pretty much his seat in Philadelphia. Because if you look at that whole linebacking group, nobody's solidified. Nobody at all. And it's almost specifically the person that's not solidified who's been here the longest is Dean, because Dean's played about as much as everyone else in the Eagles uniform.
Yeah, I would say that that's fair. Just when you think specifically like the long term as well, I would probably take a little bit before McFangio kind of hands the keys to a fifth round rookie. But when we talk about by season's end, future years, yeah, you're talking about a guy who effectively has kind of the most cachet of all the linebackers right now. So I do think that there is definitely a possibility that you could be looking at him in a bit more of that kind of long term role. Okay. So we're getting a little negative here. So Trotter and Dean are our two worst linebackers. All right. So let's first phrase this one way. Trotter is a rookie who's drafted in the fifth round. So even if you want to consider Trotter one of the two, which mind you, there's 4 on the roster.
There's literally no sample size of either.
Yeah, that's just like, what are we comparing them to?
Oh, the highlight tape. They're not as good as the highlight tape. They don't have the dog in them or whatever.
Is there a linebacker that you can effectively, like, without a shadow of a doubt, call good at this point? That's already kind of a question mark there. And are we including guys like Ben Van Summeren or Brandon Smith in this conversation? Guys who are special teamers and practice squatters like that. I don't know, but anyway, just I saw that, I had to bring it up. That you had the moment. Congratulations, but Trout I think is actually going to be something reliable down the line, and if he has this, again, it's the same praise that's been given to Nakobe Dean. IQ. You need production on the field as well.
Right.
I think that he may have an opportunity to do so, if for no other reason than I don't know that tandem of White and Vaughn, lasts that the entire season. And whether that is, just due to performance, whether it's due to injury, this, that, the other thing, there is going to be ample opportunity for Dean, for Trotter. And, if Trotter can approach the game on the field as well as he's approaching it off the field, then, maybe there's hope for him yet in terms of actually producing when it comes to playing on the on the big stage there. So really kind of wrapping up on the defense, there's not really a whole lot that you can kind of say about the defensive line. I think, just on these very light touch, early 7-on-7, you're not really looking at a ton of production there. But Mike, just to kind of get your opinion while you are here, you kind of look at that defensive line kind of from head to toe, and they're switching into a lot more of a versatile scheme. You're going to be looking at a lot more 43, a lot more 52, and you're talking about a lot of young guys as well. A lot of new guys, or maybe not a lot of new guys, but new guys and young guys between Bryce Huff, young guys like Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter as well. Who's really the player that you're looking to step up in the absence of the impact of a guy like Fletcher Cox and a guy like Hassan Reddick this season? So who on that defensive line are you looking towards in that role?
I mean, this is a guy I loved last year, was Milton Williams, who I think is going to obviously have a lot more snaps this season with people missing. He's really good. I mean, he's good against the run. He can get to the quarterback, and he seems to want it. And it looked like he was getting a lot of good reps today from what I saw and was reading. So one guy I would call just from a pass rush perspective. And then, I mean, not really so much of a pass rusher, but Jordan Davis needs to take the next step. I mean, this is, I think, 3 different people, including himself, like 2 coaches and now himself, have said that basically, without saying he wasn't in shape, pretty much said that he wasn't in shape last year. So he says he's taking it seriously and he's taking care of his body, he's conditioning. He's the guy they really need to step up big time. And for his size and the potential that he has, that would be really key if he takes the next step in his development.
Now, as far as the defensive side of the ball, real quick, I just want to make one more note about the linebackers. As an overall group, I think there's a lot of hope and a lot of you better get right. So this is still a full year of development as a cohesive group because everything is brand new. Um, that it's just too early. I mean, to have any sort of read on it and to have any sort of there's not a sample size to have any sort of frame of reference. But Zach and Mike, since you guys were talking about defensive line, I want to flip it to the other side real quick because Mike, you did confirm Landon Dickerson was not there today for the first day minicamp. So in his place, right, was Mekhi Becton. What role and in what way will Mekhi Becton pretty much contribute to the team this year? Because he has to in some sort of way.
I love that move. I love that move as soon as they made it. I mean, this is a former first round pick. He was high. Was he 4th overall? He was pretty high in that first round. And to hear Lane Johnson talk about him today, he was like, he's been the hardest worker, the most impressive guy of this entire offseason program. Immediately thought he would slot in behind, Mulata or Lane at the tackle spots, but now he's playing guard today and apparently looking pretty good at guard. This is a guy that could really make a difference on this team, especially if Steen were to struggle, if he does win the job on the other side. I mean, this could be the best signing they made in the entire offseason, honestly.
He was a first round pick 11 in 2020.
He went was talking about it in that top 5, but then he might have been medically red flagged and fell a little bit. But he's been exciting, and I honestly think that we're kind of looking at a guy who, despite his current contract, might be around in Philadelphia for a little bit. And I think that at this point, what they're effectively trying to do is maybe not rebuild from the ground up, because there are certain good tendencies in there. Obviously, a lot of his game is just based on his talent in terms of size and athleticism. But kind of just putting him through a crash course in the Stoutland University of Stout, and kind of just learn a bit of that versatility. I think long term, you're going to be probably seeing him on that right tackle spot more so, just because I do think he'll be that primary backup to Lane there. But to know that he's getting work not only at guard but on the left side, I think is definitely encouraging, because you want that flexibility. That's partly what you have in Matt Hennessy, for instance, where you can kind of go between guard and center. Now you have that between tackle and guard as well. So to not only have that positional flexibility between tackle and guard, but to work that right and left side, which, again, as Andre Dillard always taught us, like, that's not as easy as everyone thinks. So I like that. I like that flexibility, and the willingness to do so is I think very telling. We talked about already. He's a former first round pick. He was projected to be one of the long-standing tackles moving forward for the Jets. And he's kind of in a spot of humility, and he's taken well to it, signing a 1-year deal to, be a reserve effectively. And now not only do you have him working guard, but, he's taking steps on the left side when he plays on the right. Like, his willingness to work with Stout on that, I think is something that you have to absolutely credit him on. There's a lot of maturity there. Ron brings up, why was a first round pick released? And, it can happen that guys, are either released or don't sign their second contract with the team, right? So in Mekhi's case, he's dealt with his fair share of injuries, and I think that's definitely something to kind of watch moving forward. But I'm not necessarily worried about it as long as he's playing a reserve role. If we're talking about him being the heir apparent to Lane Johnson, that I think maybe we have a little bit more of a conversation. But for now, I think that he's a quality player. He's definitely a talent, and I actually don't know, was he released, or did they not pick up his 5th-year option? Well, I guess he'd be on his 4th year, so I guess he must have been released in that case. But either way, he just the cap hit was surely relatively high for a first-round pick. So if you have a guy who you're concerned about him, necessarily playing, from that perspective, it makes sense to move on from. It's a situation where I think if Stoutland's not here, I don't know for sure that they bring him in, or at least they're not as enticed to bring him in. So definitely something that I think there is some excitement around. But from the sounds of it, not the only offensive lineman to be excited about. So this quote came earlier from Ruben Frank, actually brought this up. I'm going to pull up the actual quote so I can give it to you verbatim here. So this is him talking about, or actually, this is him quoting Jeff Stoutland, rather, comparing Tyler Steen to former Eagle Brandon Brooks, which I like immediately. That just if that doesn't get your engine revving, I mean, you're dead inside. It's just a beautiful, hopeful comp if he can live up to that comparison. So, here's the quote from Rube. Brandon Brooks to me, that's the person. That's who you're looking at, who you're looking for, rather. Ain't many of them around, but that's who you're looking for. Size, length of arms, explosive power, all these things. Lower body flex, all these things are like all into one. It's like, holy cow, how did you find this? And so you're always comparing everybody. In my mind, I'm comparing him to him. He has a little bit of that, like a lot of that. Actually, Tyler does. So the thing coming out of the draft, why Tyler Steen was not projected as a tackle necessarily was that length of arms is just better suited for guard. So, I don't want people to think back on that and say, well, that just means he has, in general, poor measurables. It just means it's not ideal for the tackle position, and that's better suited for the guard position. So you put together that plus his athletic profile and clearly the way that he appears to be picking up his technique. And yeah, that's, I think, absolutely exciting. In terms of what we're potentially looking at that right guard, which has been a bit of a uncertainty. It's a bit of an uncertainty just with Cam Jurgens moving from right guard to center. You have Tyler Steen. You have Trevor Keegan. And then they also, of course, just picked up who we'll talk about in a little bit here, a brand new free agent. But Mike, what do you really make of this, comparison and the kind words basically from the coach just about Tyler Steen and what's your level of hopefulness in him as the potential starting guard?
I mean, that's high praise, right? I mean, Brandon Brooks was a really good player, maybe underrated to some extent. That's really high praise. And to hear Stoutland say that, give him that kind of praise is even takes it to a whole nother level. I mean, it's his job to lose at right guard. I mean, so if he's coming into camp motivated and looking sharp, I mean, Lane also today was gushing about him, saying it's night and day between how he looked last year and how he looks at this time going into camp this year. I mean, obviously they haven't done too much, but he said just based on what he's seen out of his footwork, he looks incredible. So we'll see what happens when the pads come on, but it's all very encouraging. And I think maybe some people thought he could maybe be able to replace Lane at right tackle, but if they get a starting guard out of this guy, then you're going to turn that line over pretty quickly.
Yeah, something I like about the offensive line, the depth that there is with Hennessy, with Becton, and now with Scharping, is that there is actual NFL, like a frame of reference for a sample size, and just having that background, it makes for good competition. And it's like iron sharpening iron finally at an NFL level when you have real experience to find out, okay, who is going to be the guard that we're going to eventually have to rely on and who can handle the heat of being flexible on the offensive line if a guard doesn't go down and, like, let's say Lane has a hurt foot again or hurt whatever again, like a hand. The idea that since Kelsey retired is that you want to protect the offensive line and keep them healthy. You're bringing in guys who aren't old. I mean, Scharping is 27 years old. And he has played with Houston. He's played with Cincinnati. I look at him, and I mean, I don't know too much about him myself, and he's bounced around a little bit, but he also had to remember that Becton's not guaranteed much of anything. He's on a 1-year deal. Everybody's on a prove it option right now, and I don't think anybody's well represented by their past or where they're drafted and how that all went, because Stoutland and being a Philadelphia Eagle is somehow just like this weird sense of like, almost being reborn as an offensive lineman when you go through camps and you develop with him. So I'm just happy to see that there's, real depth with some experience in the background here that Stoutland has to work with.
Yeah, that's what I think. The last time I was on, Zach, Brian, and I were debating whether they should take guard or tackle in the first round, and we were having some fun with it. But when you have the great luxury that is Jeff Stoutland, you can do these things, and you can take flyers on guys that didn't pan out, or you can take guys in the later rounds and develop them into solid players. So it's a really nice luxury to have.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And Eric, that experience that you talked about, I mean, obviously that's huge. Hennessy, I think we've been pretty clear on that we expect that he's going to definitely be able to contribute in terms of even if it's just pushing guys, but being able to contribute as far as technique and Cam Jurgens, you have a veteran presence in your ear. And I think Max Scharping can provide that as well. He's got 33 games of starting experience. He's kind of turned more into a journeyman as his career's gone on. So all that starting experience came in his first 3 years in the league. Hasn't started a game since, even though he's played in, I think it's like 31 games that he's played in since then. So there is that level of not only starting level experience, but you have a guy who knows what it's like to be a starter and then to lose that role as well, which I think provides a certain sense of value as well, just because you have a guy who's kind of gone through those different experiences of the league. It's a guy who not everything's been handed to him, and he's, I don't want to say fallen on tough times, because he's still a contributing player in the NFL, and he should, that is an extreme accomplishment. But you have a guy who knows how to handle adversity, I should say, or hopefully does, and someone who can help talk these guys through these potential issues, and has likely learned a lot playing for the Houston Texans, and then also just, I mean, with the Cincinnati Bengals, I get like it's not been a great offensive line situation in Cincinnati, but you are playing with a lot of impressive playmakers on offense there. So just certain tendencies that perhaps you pick up in practice, and I just think there's definitely going to be some value in Sharping moving forward. But do we kind of expect Sharping to be here past camp? Is this a guy who we think that they're going to ride into the season, or do we think that they kind of move on to okay, Steen's our guy, and we have Keegan as the backup at right tackle there? The one thing I'll say before you answer is that Sharping does have versatility on both sides as a guard there. But of course, we just talked about they are playing with Kai Becton at left guard as well. And we've also talked about Matt Hennessy. So, with kind of all that in mind, I'll start with you, Mike. What's really your kind of expectation on the potential level of production, or rather, how long you think his stay in Philadelphia might be?
I mean, I think it's hard to predict, right? I was doing cracking the depth chart and trying to make those predictions last week, and I did that in the article, and that was before we got Sharping. And I mean, they drafted, Keegan and McMahon, so it's getting a little tight in the chairs in that room too. But I think anything Eagles have proven over the years that they're going to keep the best guys. I mean, they don't care. Like Dennis Kelly wasn't cutting it last year, even though they, I traded for him. They cut him because he wasn't good enough. So they're going to keep the best guys and the healthiest guys. And if he has a hell of a camp and proves that he deserves a spot, offensive line is arguably the most, important position group in football, because you got to protect the most important position in football, the quarterback. And the Eagles have always had one of the best offensive lines in football. So I think there's a very good chance he could be here once the season starts. But they're going to take the best guys, and it doesn't matter how much money someone's making or what they gave up to get him, or how high of a draft pick he was. In the case of Dillard, they probably bought him a little extra time, but at the end of the day, they're going to keep the best guys, and that's who's going to make the team. So, yeah, I think he could be here.
I absolutely think that he will be here once the season starts and throughout the season. You got to remember, and this is just going back to the term of some of these guys on their contracts. It's not here for a long time. They're battling out for a stay pretty much in Philadelphia. And as the offensive line gets older with guys like, Kelsey retired. Okay, so now you're worried about Lane. We're constantly going to think about Lane. We drafted, to kind of figure out that part. We also have now guys who have NFL experience that can, find a little bit of leverage and battle their way in. Not everything's going to pan out. So really Philadelphia is giving themselves like a bevy of options right now at that, and just on the offensive line, because it's not nearly as as much of a sure thing, if you will, because the Eagles offensive line is a pride and joy. But as guys get older, it's a nonstop replenish. And if you can find something in free agency at this age of like maybe 27, whatever it may be, even Mekhi Becton, obviously not old, I don't even think he's even 30. I don't think he's close to 30. So if you're able to find a guy like that and then they just revive in Philadelphia, think about in the draft even how much you don't really have to worry about that, how much you can go, focus on a linebacker. Maybe you could focus on a safety. You can focus on the secondary or the defensive line or whatever, because no one's, on the defensive line, by the way, like no one's necessarily said like, this is going to be the guy that's like the new Brandon Graham, the new Fletcher Cox. Like we don't have that yet. We have some uncertainty there too. If you can take that away from the offensive line and just kind of change the way you go about that, dude, I just think that we're looking at guys who are going to be here for a long time, or maybe not a long time, but at least throughout this year, because they're going to be battling to be here for a long time.
Yeah, it's nice that considering the changes that we've seen the O-line kind of go through over the years, and guys like Brandon Brooks moving on into retirement, guys like Jason Kelsey, obviously, who just retired officially the other day,
Right.
and talking about guys like Lane Johnson, who, listen, I'm not going to tell you when Lane Johnson's going to stop playing football. I think there's a lot of concern about that this offseason. But if it's another 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I mean, I can't tell you when that guy's going to stop. He's absolutely crazy. But if he did decide to hang it up in the next year or two, I have faith that if they haven't already addressed it, that they would address it in the correct way.
Jason Peters is
Jason
in the league.
Peters surely still in the league?
He's in the league sometimes, like for a quarter each game. No, he's a fantastic player and all, but like even when he was in Philadelphia, when Philadelphia won the Super Bowl, he was in the game sometimes. Like,
how can Jason Peters be allowed?
He's getting paid.
Yeah, kind of. At times. So he was with Seattle.
Yeah, just like how he plays.
He was on Seattle's roster last year. Played 8 games. He played 8 games last year.
I didn't even know. I didn't even know he was in Seattle.
I did not know that either. So that's absolutely crazy.
He's just hanging out in the rain getting bills.
I mean, good for him. I had the chance to have a little bit of a working relationship with Jason back in the day, and yeah, good for him. That's all I got. Just live long and prosper, and probably not going to sign another contract in Philadelphia, but. Good for him, man. Chase that bag, as all football players absolutely should. So
we don't consider with our like going over the offensive line how it's not just a matter of their age, right? In a matter of retirement. Think about like we have such a perspective now with the Kelseys and that they're being mainstream. If you listen to Kylie Kelsey, like. She kind of just she had it in hand because Jason's a family man, but like, it's kind of like, you won your Super Bowl. Once you do that, you kind of like, you've reached that pinnacle even. I would say that players, it would be more common to, they'll retire with still maybe some time or some gas in the tank. Especially if they've already won the championship. So I'm even by saying all that, right? Like I kind of mean like a guy like Jordan Mailata.
Yeah, I think it depends kind of situationally. You have guys who, like, if you are relatively healthy, and I mean this, in a lot of ways, but, specifically in a neurological way, if you're relatively healthy and you feel like that's not going to change just by playing a minor role for teams, into your, I was going to say 30s, but Jason's 41 now, hell, like, then I think you're still going to have kind of those guys here or there. But when you talk about the guys like the Jason Kelce's, the Aaron Donalds, like there's going to be great players out there who have, I think, like you kind of said, just accomplished what there is to accomplish. And part of the reason why I think that you have a lot more people moving on to this, it's not just moving on to being family men. Like that's part of it for sure. But you have more and more guys who are joining broadcasting teams. Jason Kelsey just signed up with ESPN. Like, and obviously Tom Brady, whenever he feels like it, I guess, will also get on that train. Even though I feel like he's signed with and he's been very kind of lukewarm to the whole idea. But you're going to have more and more guys moving into those type of roles.
If Jordan Mailata and the Eagle and on the Eagles, right, what they win the Super Bowl this year with the personality that he has, how quickly do you think he would be like, I got my Super Bowl finally? I'm moving on. I mean, I get that money. Right, I like Greg Olsen, but I think he has much more of a personality than Greg Olsen. I like Greg Olsen.
Oh, for sure.
But that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, there are guys where I'm just like, man, Mel Lotta, you can just kind of put him in there. Yeah, he's on the team in 2020. So if he wins the Super Bowl and it's only like 3 years ago that he joins the team, it'll be a relatively short career if he just wanted to move on. It'd save his health.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that he likes kind of pursuing other areas of life. He definitely just kind of generally enjoys life. I think he does really love this team, though. So I wouldn't be surprised if he, at that point is motivated to go for two. I think that he, yeah.
You also have like a batch of football players who I don't think everybody really remembers this, but they made a Olympic curling team out of them. So they just pursue other athletic feats. Like Jared Allen is on that team, and he's not a Super Bowl winner. Like, go figure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely a possibility that guys, could. It's an ever-changing league. I think that there's always going to be guys who are kind of trying to chase that bag. I think there's going to be, guys who you kind of know that they're going to hit it on the multimedia platform thereafter. And, again, places like ESPN, they're moving away from journalists and they're moving towards former athletes. That's kind of just almost in a sense, kind of the world's moving, when we talk about all the new podcasts with former athletes and this and that. And, you're just getting a lot more guys who used to play the game, guys who are, and I do kind of wonder if this was the, effectively the NBA on TNT effect, that kind of trickles down and, you get fun-loving guys that the public loves to see. They can talk about the game in an intelligent way, but also have some fun at the same time. And it's pure entertainment. So, from that perspective, I definitely get it. And as a journalist who doesn't really have any interest in that specific kind of work, I don't really mind it. But it is just kind of an interesting direction. Like, I'm not worried about losing out future jobs to Jason Kelce because I'm not going to want those jobs. So that's just, in terms of what I'm looking for. And there's no way I could compete with a guy like Jason. But I'm glad that he's doing that stuff because I don't think I was ready to not have Jason in my life anymore. So to be able to see him, I think it's Monday Night Football, is that right? To be able to see him, to be able to see him in that role, I think it's going to be nice moving forward. But before we wrap up today, just one thing I want to talk about because there's been kind of a lot of not even controversy. It's one of those things where controversy sometimes gets brought up in this town because there is no controversy. And so this stems around Devonta Smith and his contract, right? So obviously Justin Jefferson just signed his huge, huge deal. Justin Jefferson, best receiver in the league. And, now you have Devonta Smith being asked about his contract, if any of the big money that certain wide receivers have received recently, if that's kind of changed how he felt about his contract. And he was quoted saying, "You can't be counting the pockets of others. I'm where I want to be." To you guys, and I think I know where you're both going to go with this. I kind of just want to get us all definitively on the record. Is it as simple as that? If he's where he wants to be, he's got a shit ton of money coming his way, and he's good to go. Is it, like Mike? I'll start with you. Do you think that honest answer is really where he's at?
Man, that's. I want to take him at his word because
it's a secret question in this. Yeah. Like if the Eagles are about to go on a run where you could just come back and be like, broadcasting's finished. I'm back, dude. Like, I think that's the secret question, but
I do want to take him at his word because I've talked to him a couple times, and he's such a humble kid, a good kid. But I mean, I guess he should have known how the market was going to play out. This wide receiver market's been blowing up for a couple of years now, so that's probably on his agent. But and then he's also got to deal with AJ Brown, who seems to want a pay raise, and I'm waiting for him to ask for a new contract already after seeing what Jefferson got.
Nope.
I am going to take him at his word, because I do think that he's set with this contract for a while, and he's going to get another contract unless barring some unforeseen career-ending injury. And he is.
Well, geez, let's not talk like that. Let's not talk like that before the season starts.
And he's also technically, I mean, he's really the number 2. I mean, you can call him 1A, 1B, whatever you want, but he's technically the number 2. I don't know how many number 2s are going to get more money than a Justin Jefferson or an AJ Brown. So I mean,
more than those guys. I think the closest comparison is, you look at guys like, Jalen Waddle, but at the same time, he's kind of more of like a, in certain cases, even kind of like well, Devontae is also a 1B, but just when you look at kind of the speed threat, that's, or the difference in type of receiver, AJ Brown's a bit more volume than Tyreek Hill, so that kind of gives more opportunity to Jalen Waddle, so you can kind of understand the pay in that case. Or Nico Collins was the other guy who signed this offseason, but technically, I guess he's a 1 in Houston. Even though that situation is a little less well defined, but as far as Devontae goes, I feel, and I don't usually say this about athletes because there's not a whole lot of athletes who are like this. Myself personally, I think he's just telling the truth out there, and part of that is I think that this guy really understands. I think he understands the business side of this a little bit more than some people give him credit for, and not just the business of his own pocket, but like the business of winning and what comes with that in terms of endorsements and this and that and legacy and what that could even mean after a career is over. And so, if he wanted to go out there and if he wanted to be the number 1 target for some team, he could have just not signed an extension, and he could have just, even more than Justin Jefferson did, just kind of said like, all right, I'm going to play the field, and whoever wants me, I can be a number 1 receiver for you. And I think he has the talent to do that on more teams than not. But he seemed to really enjoy Philadelphia as a place. He seems to enjoy playing alongside guys like AJ Brown, who a lot of players have had a lot of great things to say about. He's just seemed very content in Philadelphia. So if he leaves some money on the table in the short term, he can make a good bit more back in the long term. As long as they win, that's the big thing there. But yeah, no, I definitely would kind of take him at his word here. But Eric, how are you feeling about the?
He's fine with all that because he wants to save the team money. So when Jason Kelsey's just like, hey, they're about to, close in on a championship, I should come back in. He can burst in through like the Kool-Aid man, and boom, he's fine with it. No, honestly, here's the deal.
Did you got to actually do that? Did Jason Peters do that? I'm trying to remember. Like there was somebody who had retired and came back, wasn't there?
I feel like, Favre.
Well, that's not quite what I'm talking about, but talking about a little bit of a different situation. But anyway, I see what you're saying.
No, I look at the wide receivers in this sort of way. Like I think he means what he said. That's pretty much what I'm getting at. You look at a 1A, 1B situation. I think he really just wants to play with somebody like AJ Brown. And I think it does come down to like, he's not worried about what someone else is making because he'd rather be on the team that's probably going to win. Like I look at Justin Jefferson and how much he's getting paid, and it's like, isn't Sam Darnold throwing him the ball?
Or JJ McCarthy, I guess.
Okay, yeah, that's the only joy he's going to have this season was signing that contract because he's going to be really mad at his quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be mad if I'm counting on sacks. That's no problem for me. Like, as much as I would want to win, like I'll be honest, I'm a little less mad with my head in the clouds because I'm sitting on cashola.
That's fair. I mean, he's counting his money, but he that's really it.
Different shows for different folks. Players have more power than they ever had. Demand a trade in a couple of years if the situation doesn't improve, and you're good to go. Yeah, I think Justin got what he wanted. Good for him. And yeah, it's we'll see what the long term ramifications are, but I don't think that QB situation is improving anytime soon.
Yeah,
Based
I
on
mean,
who
they're
they
going to
have in
have
the
to
building.
find their guy. They're going to have to find their guy while they paid him all that money, and that's the only way their winning starts happening. I don't think because Justin Jefferson, and Sam Darnold is going to be the link up out of somewhere. I think
No.
right. Like what has a better opportunity of happening, that or Baker Mayfield winning the Super Bowl on that Tampa team.
It's either they hit on McCarthy or Jefferson's asking for a trade at some point.
Yeah, I think that's probably a lot more likely that you see him kind of move on after maybe giving
Kenny
JJ
Pickett,
years.
Kenny Pickett fucking leading us to the Super Bowl as a better opportunity of happening than Sam Darnold and that's it. I'll say it like that.
Pittsburgh's been talking a lot about how good they've been hearing that Kenny Pickett's been in Eagles practices. He almost got picked off by Isaiah Rodgers today, but we don't need to talk about that. We don't need to talk about that. He's been doing good though, and
just saying, it's an improbable. Just saying,
improbable. I mean, what are the odds of Philadelphia being led to the Super Bowl by a backup quarterback?
That's not improbable. I've seen it before. Seen it one time.
I mean, like if I had a nickel I'd only have one nickel, but it's still a lot, considering. But yeah, so we'll see what happens as camp continues to move on. We'll be back again next week to talk a little bit more about what's going on around the scene. Who's looking like what. Maybe we'll have a few more kind of offensive updates for you. Obviously, it was pretty offensive line heavy in terms of it, but I think part of that's just we kind of know what we got in terms of these star players on the offense. We just got to see guys produce. Guys like Jalen Hurts, guys like Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Saquon Barkley, whoever the hell wide receiver 3 is. That's which is going to be interesting, and maybe that's the conversation to have. Is who of the best of the rest of that receiving core is looking to take that role? Because if we're talking about, John Ross, we're talking about Paris Campbell. Yeah, I mean, we'll see.
Grant Calcaterra. That's what Sirianni
said.
Grant
Calcaterra moving to wide out. Yeah, you never know. You absolutely never know. If we got to put out there.
That's all we need.
Blowing smoke there too, but he said Calcaterra is in the mix for the number 3 spot.
Listen, that's his whole thing is that he can receive. The whole thing is that he's a receiver. And Ron, as far as this being on time next week, buddy, I wouldn't bet on it. Like that's my inside scoop of the week is take the over in terms of minutes after. Take the over in terms of minutes after 7:30 that we start. That's my recommendation. My little bit of. Hopefully, I don't get banned from the podcast for giving out insider information. But that's the scoop that I would expect come next week. But for now, thank you so much, everybody, for watching and commenting, sticking around with us. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. If you haven't yet, please be sure to do so. But we really appreciate you doing so. And honestly, just thanks for talking birds with us. Until next week, we've been flipping the birds. Thank you so much.
Go Birds!
There it is.
Flipping the birds.